Hello. Thank you all for coming to the very first lecture in the talk series, The Year of Social Media. I just want to give a brief introduction about the talk series. It's being organized by Professor Christian Sandvig of the Department of Communication, who's sitting right here, and myself, Carrie Carajalios, in the Department of Computer Science. This talk series is being funded actually by 3 different groups, by the Coordinated Science Laboratory, CSL, which you're sitting in right now, iCube, the informatics initiative here on campus, and by the College of Media. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very, very first speaker of the series, Fernanda Viegas. It's an honor to have her here. Fernanda, I would say, has been one of the pivotal changes in getting visualization, in switching what people think about visualization in academics. She's done a lot of work in analyzing online conversations, a lot of work in looking at online collectives such as Wikipedia, a lot of work in looking at democratizing visualizations, and she's also an artist. She's won many awards. Her work has been shown at the Whitney Museum and several other museums. So instead of taking away time from her talk, I'm going to pass over the mic to Fernanda.
Cool.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. It's not every day that you get to start a speaking series, so thank you for the invitation and for the honor. So I've titled my talk From Politics to Art because what I'm hoping to do today is to give you a sense of a range of projects that I've done in visualization, and also a little bit about how I think about visualization, which is neither here or there. It's neither science or art. I feel like it's a broad spectrum. So what I thought of doing in the beginning was to show you one of our latest works. And in fact, I say our because most, if not all, of the work I'm going to show here today is work done by myself and Martin Wattenberg, who has been my colleague and collaborator for the last several years. So if I say we, I'm referring to the two of us. Okay, so to get started, we're going to look at something you should all be very familiar with, Google. And you know, there's something called, I start typing UI, U, and I don't even have to finish it up because Google starts suggesting things for me. So that's called Google Suggest. And basically what it's doing, it's allowing me to hopefully type less and complete for me the search that it thinks I'm about to make, right? In fact, there's this whole Google Instant interface that now changes the entire page as you're typing to say, is that what you're looking for? I think I already got your result without you even have to click the enter button. But the other thing, so this was a very utilitarian thing, right? Google did this so you would have to spend less time typing. But the cool thing about Google Suggest is that it also allows us to peek into each other's minds. So if I do Y, it starts telling me what people have in their mind, right? And what is it that they go to Google to ask. So I thought, Martin and I looked at this and thought this would be a great thing to visualize. So we created this little application called the Web Seer. And what it does is that it visualizes what you just saw. So if I say, why doesn't he? So why doesn't he call? Why doesn't he like me? Why doesn't he love me? And so forth. And basically what I'm doing is I'm visualizing the same list, but now I'm varying the thickness of the arrow and the size of the font based on the popularity of that query. The other thing I want to do, because this is visualization, we can actually take in a whole lot more data at once. I'm going to compare that query against a second query. So I'm going to say, why doesn't she? So there I can see right away, you know, where the genders are the same and where they vary, right? Why doesn't she leave? Why doesn't she just leave? Exactly. So you can start turning this into all sorts of interesting questions. So if I type in, is my son – versus is my daughter. And you can see people's anxieties, right? You can see also their hopes. You know, is my son or is my daughter gifted? To continue with the family theme, I can say, is my husband versus is my wife. And very quickly you go from the funny stuff to the very depressing portrait of marriage. But that's what people are coming to Google asking for. I just heard another query that people thought was interesting. Professor how do you say your last name? Sandvik. Professor Sandvik gave me a good one. Google will versus China will. I thought that was pretty telling. Exactly. So the other thing is that you can get a lot more metaphysical too. You can ask questions like how to be versus how to pretend to be. And you can tell that everybody's trying to be happy, or at least to look like they're happy, which is good. It's a start. And because no demo, especially not this talk, is not done without politics, we can say are Democrats versus are Republicans. And you get a sense of the confusion today. But if we switch this around between asking a question to affirming, we get interesting things too. So I can say Democrats are versus Republicans are. And at least we all agree on one thing. So anyway, so this is online, and it's available. Anyone can go to the webs here and play to your heart's content. So the thing, to take you back in time a little bit, one of the cool things about what I just showed is that it allows you to see what other people are thinking, what they're doing, what's on their mind. A big part of that comes from our dealings with collective intelligence. So the first time I actually had the chance to look at what other people were doing collectively on the web and visualize that was back in 2003 when Martin and I decided to visualize Wikipedia. And the thing there, the big mystery there, I mean, try to put yourselves back in 2003. We had to explain to people what a wiki was. Nobody even understood what a wiki was, let alone how something like Wikipedia could work. So we would come to these articles. This is an article on chocolate. We would see these quite sophisticated articles with photos, with entire tables of contents. And people would be like, but how are people doing this together? You have the edit page link. But then the really interesting thing is that every article has its history. It has a list of links to its edits. And each one of these links has a timestamp. It has a username. It has, a little comment here if the user decides to leave one saying what it is that they did. And we looked at this and we're like, okay, this is where it's at. This is the data we want to visualize. How do you visualize hundreds, thousands of pages of links of this? Basically, these are logs. So we created a technique called history flow, and here's how it works. Imagine you have 3 users, Mary, Suzanne, and Martin, and I give each user a color, okay? And Mary happens to have written the entire first draft of a document. So the entire version 1 it's colored by Mary's color, okay? The length of the line tells me the length of the document, okay? Then version 2, Suzanne comes along and says, this is great, but I want to add a little paragraph to the end. So you can see the blue there. Version 3, Martin comes along and says, this is way too verbose. I'm going to cut off some of the beginning text and add a little bit of my own words. And so you can see how this goes along. Now, one more thing we did is we connected pieces of text that stay the same. Okay, so if a piece of text was not touched between versions, we connected that. And that's where you get things like these holes in the wall here, because these are places where either people edit text or they deleted text. And then you can start playing interesting games. Like right now I'm showing each version equally distant from the previous and the next, right? But I can also show the same data in real time. And then I can start seeing things like rhythm. Oh, it took a long way between version 1 and version 2, but version 3 came right after that. And then I can also highlight each version, and I can show the text colored by the different people who touched that text. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run history flow really quickly. So this is history flow. Keep in mind that this was done in 2003, so this is data between 2001 and 2003. And what we're looking at here is the history of the article on design. I have this wand here that I can pull back, and I can see, you can see on the right the text of the article changing. On the left, you can see the number of people, the users who have touched this article. And I can just go back and forth and see how the article changed. So far so good. Let's look at more interesting pieces of articles. So this is, the topic is cat. Okay? So I can see right away that there are a lot more people who have touched this article. The article is quite long, actually. I can scroll down a lot. There are a whole lot more versions also. And then I see interesting patterns, like look at this spike of white. What happened there? Was that a whole lot of text and then it got deleted? What happened? So if I come all the way down, I can see that someone edited all of these paragraphs in white, and they are all paragraphs about the Unix command cat. Oh. Exactly. So this is an article about cats. Someone put stuff about cat, but it's the Unix command. So what happens next? If I bring my wand to the next version, I can see that the text didn't really get deleted. It just got redirected to a page called cat Unix. So someone just created a new page and redirected this piece of content there. Okay, so this was really interesting because it started showing us the different dynamics that people have for deciding what belongs and what doesn't belong on a page. Let me show you a bit of a topic that's more controversial. So this is abortion. Okay, so you can see a whole lot of people touched the article, but do you see anything weird here? The omissions, the black spots, yes, these gutters here, right? So what happened? I had a huge long article and then someone just deleted it. So this is vandalism. It gets reverted. Here, someone deleted it and said abortion is great, and then on the next one added abortion is good, and then it got reverted. Okay, but then the other thing that we notice, if I go all the way back here to the first deletion, and I look all the way to the bottom, this is a timestamp. So this act of vandalism happened on the 17th of December at 4:06. It got fixed on the same day at 4:07. Okay? So that's a minute. And we kept seeing this over and over again. We're like, how are these people doing this? So we got in touch with Wikipedians and we're like, what's going on? How do you do this? And they explained to us that they have something called a watch list, where anyone that edits Wikipedia pages can sign up to a page you just edited. And if you want to get notifications whenever the page is edited. Okay? And then the other strategy they use on top of that is if I recognize the person who edited the page, if I recognize the username and I trust them, I don't even bother to go and look. But if it's a new IP address or if it's a username I've never seen before, I might then go and check out what's being done. And this is how they catch vandalism so fast and how they are able to revert it so quickly. In fact, after we started seeing these things, let me just show you. If I space out the same data in real time, this is what it looks like. It's so fast it doesn't even show here, right? We downloaded the entire website and ran a statistical analysis to figure out how quickly people were reverting from mass deletions. And the mean, the average time was under 3 minutes. And if you had a cursing word in a comment, it was under 2 minutes. So it was really significant. It was really impressive. And then finally, the last page I want to show you is the one, my favorite one, on chocolate, of course. It doesn't look like anything much. It's very pink, but nothing interesting, except that this is in real time. So if I space it out by version, I have this interesting pattern, right? Does anyone want to guess what's going on here? Valentine's Day. That would be good for the pink, but no. Sorry? An edit war, exactly, exactly. So someone is putting a piece of text and someone else is taking it out, putting it back, taking it out, putting it back, right? And I can show you what it is. So if I come all the way back here, this person, Daniel C. Boyer, added this little paragraph here saying chocolate collage. Extremely rarely, melted chocolate has been used to make a kind of surrealist sculpture called collage. It survives for all this time. It's this piece of white text here. And I bring it all the way here, and then someone says, removing Boyer invention. Well, Daniel C. Boyer comes back and says, reverting, collage is not a Boyer invention. Google search for chocolate collage finds only Boyer. Reverting. Leave your humbug out. Reverting, and so forth and so on. Until eventually Daniel C. Boyer gives up and leaves it without the chocolate collage, which is very upsetting because Martin and I did a search and chocolate collage seems to exist anyway. But very quickly we were able to see these kinds of quite impressive dynamics that were happening on the pages. The other thing we did is to get rid of all the author information, because right now, remember, I'm coloring by author, but if I get rid of that, and if I just color the text by its age, so older text gets darker. The darker a piece of text is, the older it is. Then I can use that as a proxy for quality, hopefully, because in an environment like Wikipedia, if you have a piece of text that doesn't get touched after hundreds of edits, that could mean that that's a pretty stable, good piece of text. So if I scroll down, you can see that this article actually has a lot of pieces that are quite old compared to some of the new stuff. The other mode that we had was individual contributions. So I could come here and say, okay, what has this person added? So I can see that they've added this little piece. I can see how long it lasted. This other person didn't last too much. And then I can get to the very first person, and I can see how their contributions seem to have lasted for a long time. So we don't have our heuristics here. We kept seeing this pattern over and over again. Our guess was that when you start a page, chances are that people are going to work around your text a whole lot more than just completely taking over your text, deleting everything you did, and starting from scratch. So, okay, let me get out of Wikipedia. Yes?
Is this your software?
This is our software. It's available online for free. You can download it. If you do a search for History Flow IBM, you can download it for free. Okay? So one of the cool things about what we did, for us, one of the cool things about this project is that it really got us in touch with this whole notion of collective intelligence and what you can do together. And from other pieces of our work, we started noticing that, whenever you have visualization, one of the things that happens all the time is that you want to communicate whatever it is that you're looking at, or you want to communicate the insights you have, or you want to share the pictures with others. And yet there was no place to do this online. There was no place really that was supporting this kind of work. So that's why we decided, well, can we create an environment where communication is just as much part of what's going on as visualization is? So we created this website called Many Eyes, where it's a public, free website. Anyone can go there, upload data, visualize the data and share these visualizations with the world. So let me show you a little bit about Many Eyes. So let me get here. Okay. So this is Many Eyes. This is the home page. And basically, it sort of works like a media site in the sense that there are always visualizations that are being featured, and these are chosen either by the data set, which a lot of times it's quite timely, or the use of technique that's interesting. There's a whole range of techniques. There's about, I think, 18 different visualization techniques that you can use when you go to Many Eyes. And you know, anyone can go there. So this, for instance, are the latest visualizations that people have been creating on the site. And you can get a sense of how varied they are. So we have things like, you know, Wordles here, pie charts, very colorful pie chart, maps. You have visualization of text happening, tree maps. And so there's not only a range of visualization techniques, there's a range of sophistication. You know, it covers stuff like bar charts and pie charts, but it goes all the way to hierarchical data, to visualizing text. So let me show you some of these visualizations. So this, for instance, is a visualization of the US budget between 1962 and 2004. And this is as with any visualization on Many Eyes, it's interactive. So you can see that not only do we have the big categories within the budget, human resources, national defense, for instance, but within these categories we have other categories. So it's really a hierarchical data set. And then I also have this tree here on the left, because this data set's so deep, I couldn't possibly show everything at once here. So I might say, okay, I want to look now, instead of looking at the entire budget, I want to look at physical resources. So I just click here, and it shows me a quite, you know, very different kind of profile. I can open up this tree here and say, okay, so natural resources is very different yet. Or I might want to look at national defense. This was a surprise to me, to see how cyclical it is, right? It really depends on whether or not the US is at war with other nations. The other thing you can do is come back to the top and say, okay, so this is number of dollars corrected for inflation, but what if I'm just interested in percentage? So you can see that the biggest part of the budget is human resources, and that has changed from the past. It used to be national defense. Now, there are a couple of other things that are important here. One is that the visualization has a couple of links here at the bottom. So let me see if I can bring up one of these. These links are links to its data set. Oh, where did it open? Oh, here. Okay, so every visualization has a direct link to its data set. So you can see exactly right away the raw numbers, the numbers that are creating that information for you, that visualization. You can also view this entire thing as text file, so that you can very easily copy this, put it on your own, if you want to put it on Excel, if you want to do your own visualization, if you want to put it elsewhere. We felt this was really important, because the idea was not to lock down data on Many Eyes, but it was really to sort of open it up and make it very easy for people to use it in whichever way they saw fit. The other thing that's important is that you can also share this visualization very quickly. You can share it as a static image, but you can also embed it as a live visualization. So sort of how you embed a YouTube video, you can embed this, and then you have it live on your own blog or whatever it is that you want to do. And then lastly, but not least, you can see that there are a bunch of posts here underneath the visualization. So there's a conversation going on about what people are seeing on that graph. The other thing is that there are these pictures right next to the comments. So this person says, for instance, the amplitude here is huge and dwarfs everything else. Well, they're talking about some peak. What peak is that? So if I click on that image, the visualization, the page reloads, and the visualization shows itself to me with the peak that they were talking about. Okay, so I can see that this is something that happened in the early 90s. And if I go back here, then someone else came along and said, oh, this appears to be the savings and loan bailout cost. So the idea is exactly this, is if you see something that's interesting, or if you don't understand what you're looking at, can you then get other people to help you out or to collectively analyze the data that you're looking at? So let me show off some of the other visualization techniques. So this, for instance, is the stimulus bill. This is a tree map of the stimulus bill. And the way the tree map works is that you have each rectangle there refers to how much money the government is allocating to a given program or project. Okay? The size, the area of the rectangle has to do with how many dollars are going to that. So the bigger the rectangle, the more money the government is allocating to that. So you can see, and this is hierarchical. So, you know, everything here is tax cuts. Everything in the purple is aid to states. Science, I know. Someone is, yeah. So let's look at that. If I want to look at sciences, just science and technology. Okay, so I can see that within science and technology, the biggest chunk is for wireless and broadband grants. NSF got the second biggest chunk, and NASA got a very small chunk here. But anyway, it gives you a very quick understanding of not only individual numbers, but one of the most important things, which is the entire picture, right? How do you let's go back to viewing everything. How do you contextualize the numbers that were given to science and technology, for instance, against everything else, right? The other interesting thing about this particular visualization is that it was done by this organization called ProPublica, which is a media organization for independent journalism and investigative journalism. And so they came to Many Eyes as soon as the bill was out. They plopped the data here, created the visualization, took it back to their own website, because that's where the journalists were talking, were covering the news. And then their readers could then very easily interact with the tree map and continue the conversation there. And this is exactly what we were hoping would happen. Now, there's another interesting aspect. So you can definitely see how this kind of visualization would be applied to something like the government's budget, right? In fact, I've been only talking about the government's budget so far. But the cool thing about Many Eyes is that, like I said, anyone can upload anything, right? So someone created the same kind of visualization, but for a very different kind of data, their wedding. So they created a tree map of their wedding guests. Okay, so each rectangle here is a guest. The orangey, yellowish are people who have replied yes, they're coming. The green ones are people who said no. These are the maybes, and these are the people for drinks only. But the other thing is, again, this is hierarchical data. So right now we're showing this hierarchy based on who confirmed, right, and whether and how they confirmed. Here, the tag at the very top. But you can see that this person really went all out. There are all sorts of categories. There's detail category, main category. So if I bring main category all the way to the top, it rearranges and shows me these are the bride's friends, these are the groom family, the bride family, the wedding party. I mean, it's highly organized, right? It also happens to be an international wedding. I can bring up country. So I can see right away it's US and the UK with a little bit of Italy and Australia. And then my favorite one, which is age. So you bring up age, and you have young versus old. And I'm like, what is the threshold there? But anyway, that's how you do this. And this is something that we keep seeing on Many Eyes, is that people are realizing that data is anywhere, right? And that you don't have to be talking only about statistics, only about demographics from the government. You can be talking about yourself. You can be using these mirrors, right, to create representations of aspects of your lives. The other thing that happened when we launched Many Eyes is that very quickly we started noticing that people were uploading text to be visualized, and we had no way to visualize text, not even a tag cloud. So we decided, okay, we need to respond to this. So we first created a word cloud, which was fine. But then we were a little dissatisfied with the word cloud because that decontextualizes everything, right? It's just words by themselves. So we decided, is there any way that we can design a visualization of text that keeps the words in context? Okay? So that's where we created something called the word tree. So the word tree works this way. I'm going to look at the Bible, at Genesis. So if I type and God, it shows me all the places where and God appears, okay? But it shows me as a branching structure. So, and God said. So God said a lot of things. So that's a big branch. And it starts to branch off from there. And I can actually use this to navigate. So I can say, and God said, okay, what did he say? Let there be light, let there be a firmament, and so forth. I can also go back. Hello. What did he bless? He or she blessed a lot of things. I can also put this the other way around. Now I'm looking for phrases that start with this, but I can also look for phrases that end on a given token. So I can do a question mark and put that question mark at the end, and I have all the questions, right, that exist there. And I can be like, oh, what are they asking of me? Okay, spake unto me, and Old English, yes. So anyway, so it gives you a very quick way of diving into very different aspects of the text, but still getting a sense of some of the major trends in a piece of text. And again, because this is Many Eyes, all sorts of interesting data sets. This is an interesting data set. So this is a set of personals ads where I am married appears, okay? And this is all from males. So, yes. And you and you gotta love the two schools of philosophy here, right? I am married and looking. I am married but looking, right? There's the subtlety there. So anyway, this hopefully gives you a sense of the different kinds of games you can play. No pun intended. There is another visualization of text that we did, the latest one, the one called PhraseNet, where we wanted to understand if you could give as input a piece of text and get out some sort of network of concepts, okay? But we wanted to do this the cheap way. We didn't want to do any semantic analysis or very complicated stuff. So here's what we did. We created a word sequence filter, okay? So I have word 1, some bridge in the middle, and word 2. And this bridge, in this case here, I chose and, but and is not a Boolean. It's really just a word. It could be word 1 over word 2. It could be word 1 beget word 2. It could be anything, okay? And all we do is to run whatever input text you give us through that filter, and you find the pairs that have that bridge. So this is Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and we find Pride and Impertinence. Okay, so that becomes a data point. What we do then is we take these two words, they become nodes in a graph, and we have a little edge here. The edge is just the bridge that we had before. And that would have been all, but we decided to do one more thing to the layout, so that the layout of this graph, has anyone here ever seen a graph that is so tangled that you can't understand anything? Yes, I would think most of us, right? So we wanted to do it so that the layout would be as clean as possible. So one thing we did, and this is a lot of the things that happens when you try to create a network of words, because that's what we're doing, is you get a lot of lines, you get lines on top of words, you get words on top of words, and we want it to be quite legible. So one of the tricks we played is we looked at structural equivalence of nodes. So let's say I have a node A that is linked to all of these other nodes, right? The truth is that nodes B and F could switch places and my graph is still the same, right? It doesn't change, okay? So they are equivalent in that sense. So what we did is we decided to sort of summarize all of these equivalent nodes into a list. So basically now I'm just drawing one line as opposed to all these lines, and I have a list of nodes that fit this one description of connection there, okay? And so now let me show you what the PhraseNet looks like. This is all of Pride and Prejudice run against word 1 and word 2, as simple as that. So immediately I have a social network here of characters, okay? And I get the size, meaning the number of times that character appears, but I also have other clusters as well. So if I zoom in, I see things like the pride cluster, and that has vanity and impertinence and conceit and folly all together, right? So that's interesting that these sort of negative concepts show up together. And yet I have another cluster with affection and wishes and affectionate and solicitude all together too. That's another cluster. So the fact that these things tend to co-occur is of interest. The other thing I can do is I can change the bridge that I'm using. So if instead of using and, I use at, then all of a sudden I have the network of places in the novel, okay? So places where people are doing things at. And that's where I start to use my little list of things, see? Because these are all connected to the places by 1 degree of separation only. And so I can pack this up. And I can see things like, okay, so what's happening in Longbourn? Well, people are assembling there. They are being received there. There are visitors there. So you very quickly get a sense of again, you know, things that are happening in the novel. Looking at a very different kind of book, this again is the Bible, and we're doing X beget Y. So all of a sudden I have a family tree of the Bible, and it's quite circular. And I'm going to zoom into that circle, and you get really cool little patterns like these two, Azariah and Johanan. And what's happening there is when you have a son that names his own son after his father, okay? So then you have this circular pattern. And finally, the two books, the Old Testament and the New Testament, with X of Y. And you can see how everything was of Israel before, and now it's of God. Okay, so moving along, this is sort of the visualization techniques that are available on many eyes. So you can see that they span a wide range, much more than I have time to talk about, but gives you a sense of some of the possibilities. So what are people doing with the website? A lot of different things. So the 2 days after we launched the website, this user named Crossway came along and visualized a data set of name co-occurrences in the Bible. So if you had a verse of the Bible and 2 names appeared or more, that became a data point. He then created a social network of the Bible. You can imagine it's the New Testament. You can imagine who the big dot is in the middle. Blogged about it, immediately got hundreds of responses to his blog. Within a few days, this post and this visualization had gotten out of the Christian blogosphere and into a lot of different parts of the blogosphere, and it ended up on Boing Boing. This is a screenshot of someone who created a YouTube video of themselves playing with the visualizations and what kinds of insights they got from that. And then that in turn motivated other people who had statistics about the Bible to upload their data to many eyes and create visualizations themselves and continue the conversation. So this is sort of like a full circle textbook example of something we were hoping would happen, which is you have a community who has data, who's interested in some very specific topic, coming to the website, using the tools, and bringing the results back to their conversation so that they can continue whatever debate or whatever conversation they were already having. Even though we created many eyes for lay users, scientists are using it too. So this happens to be a historian who was looking at the Canadian Parliament. And I'm going to start rushing because I can see we don't have much time. This is a linguist who's using many eyes to look at language formality on corporate blogs. And you can see just the variety of techniques he has been playing with. This is this is a geneticist who's using it for microarray data. And this person has created literally hundreds of these. And we sort of sit there and think, oh, these are interesting. I don't understand anything, but they look very interesting. So this person came to us and was like, oh, I just found an interesting pattern that I wasn't aware of before. Can I use these visualizations for a publication? We're like, yeah, for sure. That's the idea. Organizations using it. So this is a non-governmental organization called the Sunlight Foundation in Washington. And they went to Many Eyes with a bunch of data sets on earmarks for bills and created a set of visualizations. This is their site. It's not Many Eyes. This got picked up by the blogosphere, and it ended up on a Lawrence Lessig, the latest Lawrence Lessig lecture on corruption, and it's widely available on the web. So the point being that these things have a way of becoming viral. Right? You do this little thing on Many Eyes, you may put it on your blog or whatever, but there's no way of knowing where it's going to end up. The media has also been using Many Eyes. I showed you an earlier example. The New York Times has their own Many Eyes. So they have an internal version of Many Eyes where readers can come to the site and create their own visualizations, the difference being that the data set, nobody can upload data. The data sets are New York Times data sets, and then you can explore those. So everything I've been talking about so far has been in the realm of science and collective intelligence. But like I said, visualization tends to be a lot broader than this. So we're going to talk a little bit about art now. And obviously, we're going to talk about music. What else? And so Martin and I were interested in understanding how people relate to the body through music. When we sing about the body, what do we sing about? So we decided to get 1,000 song lyrics, all in English, from 11 different genres. And we actually sat there thinking, trying to come up with a glossary of body parts. Okay? And we came up with 83 different body parts. We're not talking about internal body parts. We're talking about things you can see. So no hearts, for instance. And we started counting. So, for instance, you found out that in folk songs, foot shows up 1% of the time. Okay, whatever. Head shows up 13% of the time. Yeah, very interesting. So how do you visualize this, right? We did some bar graphs. Yeah. Hand shows up a lot, eyes. But you want to get something more interesting. You want to show the data as the data is. So why not show it as a bubble chart of body parts? So this is folk songs. And they're quite gentle. They're nice. The eyes, the heads, the face, the hands, big parts of what's going on. This is the blues. And again, hands is knees is big. I don't know if people are down on their knees or what it is, but knees are big on blues. And then you get into racier things like heavy metal. Uses a whole lot more body parts, some of them quite explicit. But still, eyes, hands, and face and head are the biggest winners. There's one different genre here. Very, very different. And that's hip-hop. Hip-hop is the one that was the outlier in our sample with a whole lot body parts. And in fact, if you want to put these things side by side and do a comparison, that's what we did. So you can see that you know, hands and eyes stop everything except for our outlier there. The other thing we were interested in terms of the body is seeing desire. So when you talk about desire, it's something that is very subtle and very nuanced. So we were thinking, you know, if we wanted to understand how much people would like to touch their lovers or would like to be touched by their lovers and where on the body they would do that, how would you get to that kind of data set? You know, it'd be hard for me to stop people on the street and be like, and what about here? And what about there, right? But the good news is we have the internet. We don't have to stop people on the street. So what we did is we created a map of both the male front and back and the female front and back, and put points on that map. And then we went to Mechanical Turk. So Mechanical Turk is a service by Amazon where you have, it's a market for tasks that computers aren't very good at, but people are very, very good at. And you pay people to do these tasks. They're very small tasks, and you pay very little. So for instance, you pay, if you want to ask people if 2 items are different, you pay them a penny a question, okay? Or image tagging is more expensive. It's around 5 cents, and so forth. These are some of the tasks. So we teamed up with Dolores Labs, which is a startup that does this kind of work. And we created our own interface for understanding, for prompting people on these questions. We would show different parts of the body and ask you in our little rating system, which obviously were apples. You know, if they were like really desirable, that would be like 7 apples. Not desirable, that would be like 1 or 2 apples. And you would be prompted to show with different parts of the body. And so we got we ran this for 48 hours and got hundreds of people replying to the task. So let me show you right now. I think, yeah, let me show you flash map. So this is these are some of the results. So I can click here and I can see basically what we're doing is a heat map of desirability. So the brighter it is, the more desirable it is. The bluer it is, the less desirable. And obviously, you saw things that confirmed your expectations, yes. But the cool thing is that you can also start comparing. So let's see. Oops. Oh, am I not connected? Could it be that I'm not connected? Oh, I'm not connected.
Let me connect you really quick.
Okay. Oh, I think you weren't typing there. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Okay. So let's try this again. Yeah. Cool. So I have the map on the left here is where lovers desire to touch women, and the one on the right is where women desire to be touched. Okay? So first off, one of the things we were very surprised about is that no interest on the feet. We got no fetishists, none of that. But then the other thing is look at the back region here. Right? This is how much lovers want to touch them, and this is how much women want to be touched on the nape. Okay? So this is quite a difference there. And we kept seeing islands of difference like this. So let me just show you the same data in a different way. So this is like a cartogram of desire. So I'm going to size things by the desire to be touched. And now I'm going to look even, a little scientific. I'm going to sort this out as a matrix. And voila, the top winner is the nape. Okay? So tip, everybody. So the other thing is that there are different kinds of data sets. It's not only numbers and text. Everything I've been showing you so far is numbers and text. But there are things like images, too. So a couple of years ago, Wired came to us and commissioned a piece where they wanted us to visualize something about the magazine because it was their 15th anniversary. Okay? And we're like, okay, what are we going to visualize about Wired that tells a little bit of its story? And one of the things we immediately thought about are the very different kinds of covers they have. They are known for having screaming colors. They started out have fluorescent colors, and that's what spoke to us. So we decided, can we summarize the kind of color use that they have on their covers? So what we did is we looked at, pixel by pixel, how many pixels were a certain color, but we also looked at peaks of different colors and created circles summarizing them. Okay, so the thickness of of the circle tells you how much of that color is used in the cover. And what we did is we created a piece. This actually later became a poster. This is one side of the poster where they show all the covers as they are. And this is done by months in the columns. So the first column is all the January issues. The second column is all the February, and the last one is December. And the rows are years, okay? And then on the other side, we had the actual visualization. The size of the circle has to do with the circulation of the magazine. So you can see the magazine being adopted more and more. And in fact, the magazine was bi-monthly in the beginning for a little bit there. Taking on this notion of colors and images, a little bit later, we got approached by a different magazine, Boston Magazine, who came to us and was like, visualize Boston. We want you to visualize Boston. We're like, okay, what does it mean to visualize Boston? So one of the things about Boston that everybody loves is the seasonality, right? The different seasons of the year. And we thought, how can we capture that? So we decided to go to Flickr and get all the photos that were public under CC license on Flickr that had the tag Boston Common. For those of you who know Boston, Boston Common is like the Central Park of Boston. It's like the big park. So we thought, if there's a place that hopefully we will see some difference in colors as the year progresses, it would be an outside place like the Commons. So then what we did is we scraped all of that for the year 2008. And we had different photos for different months. And then what we did is we sort of squeezed the color out of each one of those photographs and sort of laid out hue by hue, one hue on top of the other, okay? And created sort of a calendar of that. So this is what that calendar looks like. It's per month. January is at the bottom here, and it goes this way. So what we see is that as the year begins, there's a lot of white for the snow, obviously. Then you have that fuchsia, that magenta strip there, which are the flowers on the garden, the Boston garden. Then you get this bulging green for the summer, and you get a lot of foliage here. If you actually, divide things up a bit, this is what it looked like on the magazine. They actually showed the wheel, and they called out pieces of the wheel with the photos that we used, okay? And if you partition this, you can actually see that even though it's continuous, the different pieces of the year look very, very different in terms of the colors that we found. So indeed, we were able to capture some of the variance that happens on the park, even though these are just like public photos that people had taken of their kids, of people walking, of the ducks, whatever it is. So what does all of this means? I feel like what it means is that we're in this really interesting, exciting moment where visualization is sort of getting out of its ivory tower of computer science, and it's sort of like, you know, getting to the streets. You see visualization today on newspapers. You see it in art. You see, obviously, you're always going to see it in science. You see it in user participation, and Many Eyes is not the only place that you can go to make visualizations today. But I feel like the discourse and the expectations around visualization are changing. And to me, that's really exciting because it means that we're not talking about this specific technique or that specific data set. We're talking about a medium. And it's a medium in which you can be expressive, you can be scientific, you can dream up whatever it is. It's sort of like writing, right? You can use that medium to do whatever it is that you want to do, from science to poetry. And so I invite you all to participate and to play with the tools and expand even more what it means to do visualization. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We have some time for questions. So if there are any, now is the time.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the question was, if you want to participate, but at a lower level, not using a web interface like Many Eyes, but really doing the kind of work that Martin and I do, well, where would you go? What would you do? So there are today a lot of interesting communities that are quite active. So one of the communities I would highly recommend is processing. So processing is a set of libraries for Java, and they were built with this notion that it should be easier for people who want to do create visual applications to do so. And they're super active and very welcoming too. So.
Have you thought about using wiki functionalities for Many Eyes, where people can actually change their
Okay, so the question is, have we thought about using wiki functionalities for Many Eyes, where users might be able to edit the data, for instance? So yes, in fact, I'm glad you brought this up because there is a sister project to Many Eyes called Wikified, Many Eyes Wikified. And that is a place where you can edit the data, but you can also create dashboards of visualizations together. So you can create a page that has 4 different visualizations, and I can go and contribute to that or change that. So it's very much a wiki framework for the Many Eyes visualizations. And that's also available. Just Google Wikified.
Your color wheel for Boston, the seasonality was really interesting. But I was wondering if you could talk about the thought process behind creating it, because I'm sure it's very complicated. You made it sound like it just appeared out of nowhere. Do what you do.
So the question was, can I talk a little bit more about the color wheel and the process behind that?
Or just your process in general for anything.
Okay, or just the process in general. Okay, so usually what we do is we'll have an idea of something that we're interested in visualizing. And the key is to always have data involved in that idea from the start. So for instance, one of the questions about the wheel that you brought up is we would love to be able to get to that seasonality impression that people have and the things they see. How? What kind of data do we have out there? Even if we did scrape all of the photos on Flickr Flow, there's no guarantee that we're going to get that, right? So even though we had this idea, we had to very much base it on the data that we had. So from the beginning, it was important to get those photos. It was important to try to count pixels and count colors to understand, do we really have what we want to have, and can we tell the story that we want to tell? And that's one where the answer was yes. In fact, you can tell the story you want to tell, which was great. A lot of other times, the answer is no. In fact, with the data that you have, the story you thought was interesting is not interesting. So I was talking with some of the other students earlier today. We had a second project on Wikipedia where we were trying to visualize an individual's editing history as opposed to an article. And we had the data because every user on Wikipedia has a log of what they've done. And yet we struggled for 3 months trying to find the right technique to visualize that data set. And nothing was coming out of it. And we didn't find any interesting patterns. Nothing was gelling. And it wasn't until we realized that we were going very, very high in abstraction, where we were abstracting so much the data that there was no story there. We realized, you know what? We need to visualize every single edit that this person has ever made, even though this might mean hundreds of thousands of little things to visualize at once. This is where the story is. This is where the viewer will be able to look at that visualization and be like, wow, this person spent 3 months working on wine, you know, and the next 2 months working on beer. Yes, that's where I get a connection as a viewer to the visualization and to the data. It's that point where I can see myself as a person in the data. And that's not always easy to get to. It's sort of like half art, half science, how you get to that thing. It's really iterative. So work with data early on, iterate, see what you get, see what shape your data is in, iterate over that, and if your visualization is not telling you a story, it's not going to tell anyone else. So you need to find the point. It's almost like, you know, when you go to an eye exam and at one point everything just clicks into focus, you need to find that point. Because it's not about technique, and it's about things converging. So it's really an iterative process there.
To piggyback on that question, is there any type of theory or authors that you read to inform how you get to these places?
So the question was, is there any theory? Are there any authors that we read to get to the places? Yes, there's definitely. I mean, visualization is a very interactive visualization is it's in its infancy, I think. In a sense, it's very new. It started in the 80s. So it's not like we have a whole lot of theory, but we do have some. One of the things that we piggyback a lot on is visual perception, for instance. We know that there are things that work better. We know that there are things that we can pre-attentively get visually, right? So you definitely want to take advantage of things like that. But that's still at a very low level. And then at the high level, you have design. You have things like closure and foreground and background, and how do you recede. So I think there's a whole, it's very interdisciplinary. So there are things from visual perception. There are things from, so places like, well, authors like Tufte, you know, the early books, not so much the old ones, but the early books. And then there are theory papers for sure. I don't think that that's the strength of the discipline right now. Like there isn't a major theory paper that I would be like, yes, you know. I feel like it's very much a practice where you need to sort of try a lot of things, but also see what other people are doing. For instance, the New York Times does amazing stuff. And they definitely have figured out things like, you know, how do you drive the viewer's eyes to the thing that's important. One thing that people keep forgetting is, how do you boil your visualization down to one question? What is the one question you want to answer with your visualization? Instead of trying to answer 300, because you're going to be tempted to, because your data is huge. So how do you answer one question? And if you do that well, that's a very successful visualization. So, you know, there are small principles like that, but I don't think theory is one of the fortes right now of the discipline, I'm afraid. So. Oh, thank you.
Looking ahead, do you see video as for multimedia as being sort of a competitor for capturing the public's attention and communicating ideas, or are you not thinking about that?
So the question relates to video. Do I see video as competing to grab viewers' attention or telling stories, I guess, around data? I don't. I actually would highly embrace video and you know, try to figure out how you tell a story with data is a very hard problem. It's one that's one of the hottest areas right now for research in visualization, and I'm convinced that things like video should definitely help. So for instance, I'm sure most of you have seen the Hans Rosling video where he's like, and children mortality, right? And the GDP, whatever, I don't remember exactly what the two dimensions are, but he's narrating an animated scatter plot. Now, if you think scatter plots, how exciting is that? Not very, right? But that video is extremely exciting. And it's hard data, and he's telling a very important story. And it's very successful. So I feel like video is definitely something we should explore. One of the things that I always worry a little bit with video is that one of the beauties to me of interactive visualization is that it's a little bit open-ended. You know, we put up a visualization and then you can explore. You can find the things someone else hasn't found. A video is a very preset narrative. So maybe one of the cool things to do would be to explore how do you mix the openness of interactivity with the closed loop of a video. You know, and that sounds to me like it would be a very interesting proposition.
You were talking about solving one problem, and I felt like the visualization of music with the body parts did exactly that. But then it was curious to me that you use all white bodies, and especially when you get to hip hop, it just seems like the reference is so off. I'm wondering if art and accurate representation are sort of at odds in your work ever. It seems like in your presentation you make it seem like they work perfectly together, but I'm wondering if there's really competition there.
Oh, between art and?
And sort of accuracy in representation.
So, okay, so the question was, in the flash map piece, we were talking about hip hop, and we were showing completely white bodies, right? Is that completely at odds with the data that we were showing? And how do we balance that in our artwork in general? Absolutely agree with your point. One of our limitations on that piece specifically was that it was very hard to find a place where we could actually find body parts at all, let alone whatever ethnicity. So we found this amazing repository of Swedish of images of the body at very, very high resolution, and they were doing this from all different parts of the body, different positions and everything, and they were doing this for 3D modeling for games, and we used that. So yes, if we had access to better photos of different kinds of ethnicities, we would definitely have used that. We just really could not find that. Having said that, it's no excuse. I feel like we need to do better, and we try. But you know, we try to get, we try to both in the art projects and in the not so artistic but more scientific projects. I feel like one of the things we try to do is to be very true to the data that we're dealing with. So, for instance, in the case of the Wikipedia thing that you saw, we created a technique. We had no idea what the diagrams would look like, or even if we would understand them. Nobody had ever tried to visualize Wikipedia. We're like, this is going to be such a mess. We're not going to, what are we going to see? And the cool thing about that technique for us was that not only did it let you see the different things like edit wars, but it was that it showed you the messiness. Wikipedia is a very messy place. It's a place where people argue. It's a place where people revert each other's actions. And to me, one of the interesting parts of that technique was that it was low enough on the data that it showed that messiness. So we try. If we're successful or not, that's, you know, not for me to say. So.
I'd really like the stuff to be around for a while. How are you going to sustain it and keep these things viable for like decades?
You're talking about things. So the question is how to maintain these things and keep them alive for decades to come. Are you talking about things like Many Eyes, for instance?
Well, all of your things are based on the computer and network technology that is changed between the time you left home and the time you got here.
It's true. In fact, that's part of why there isn't a live version of this. It's because Wikipedia is so huge now that, and they are so afraid of more traffic to their website that they were like, we would love to have this on every single page, but we can't. There's no definitive answer to your question. It's something that we struggle with. In fact, we are constantly switching. So before we used to do everything in Java. We don't anymore. Many Eyes was done in Java because Java allowed you to do these visualizations really, really quickly. If we were to build Many Eyes today, it would not have been in Java. We're trying to keep along with, I don't know, archival things like videos and images. That's the best right now that we can do, but that's definitely a question.
Related to that, who is we in that context? Who is going to take care of this for 20 years or 30 years?
So the good thing about something like Many Eyes is that it was a project we did when we were at IBM. So it's owned by IBM, and IBM just productized Many Eyes. So it continues to be open and free to the public. But the good sign there is that it made its transition from a research group, which was what we were, to a product group. And that is a very good sign for the lifespan of a project. Okay? Now, nothing is permanent. That doesn't mean that it's going to be around in 50 years. I don't know. But it's a good omen to the lifespan of the project.
One of the problems with visualization isn't the visualizing, it's the data itself is messy. And visualization gives you insight into that data, which you can then refine and query the data, but I don't see any tools for that second half of the loop. And I was wondering about your experience. Are there good tools? Do you have good tools that's your next step of research?
So the question was about data. It's fine to visualize data, but a lot of times even getting the data or looking at the data itself, it's extremely messy. And yeah, you're right. Like, even before you visualize anything, you spend hours just cleaning your data. So yeah, the good news there is we personally aren't doing anything in this space yet, but there is very good work coming out of MIT, for instance, where you clean your data on the fly. It gives you feedback, and it's aimed at non-developers. So let's say a journalist really needed to clean their data, and they're not going to do it programmatically or anything like that. There are interfaces now, and I'm forgetting the name. A good paper for that is the Potter's Wheel, and the work coming out of MIT is based on the Potter's Wheel. What is the name of David Krager from MIT, one of the HCI. Karger. So David Karger's group, if you look him up, that's where all of the work on data cleaning is being done, and I really like that work. I think it's very well done.
He's actually giving a talk. He's actually going to be giving a talk here in the spring. So, just an aside. Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. Well, we have time for one more question. I saw that hand sort of, I didn't mean to ruin a Friday afternoon. So, one more question.
It strikes me that one thing I really like about interactive visualization is that is the animation. So when you're playing around, you actually see animation seems to serve this function of emphasizing change. I see that a lot on the New York Times graphics you're working with, like different demographics, for example, and you switch something, you see everything fly around.
Okay, so the question was about animation and how do we think about animation in our work. So yes, completely agree with you. Animation is key and we use it purposefully. Even though it seems a little gratuitous, like, wow, why are you animating stuff? It looks cool, but is it useful? It is. The reason is because when you change states in states of a visualization, it can be very jarring if I was to change from one part of a hierarchy to a different part. You'd be like, what? Am I in the same place again? What just happened? So if you make things grow, if you make things shrink, if you're zooming in, if you see that zoom in and zoom out effect, for the viewer, it's a lot better to sort of orient themselves as to what they just did. They clicked that button that they knew would do that. But the animation is one way to guide your eye through what's happening so that you don't completely change the entire image on them. They're like, what was that axis again that I was looking at? So people tend to be very lost if you just completely change the picture. So animation is very, very important. And not only that, like you said, it has an aesthetic value too. People like things that move. They look organic. They look more interesting. They look animated. So absolutely, we're big fans of animation with a purpose.
Okay, thank you. Well, first I'd like to thank Fernanda Viegas for coming and inaugurating our talk series.
My pleasure.
Let's give her a round of applause. And I would also like to thank all of you for coming, joining us this Friday afternoon. Finally, if you'd like to be part of the email list for the talk series and you did not see the clipboard that went around, please feel free to come down and add your name to the list. There's a lot of talks coming out throughout the rest of the year, and we'd love to see you at them. So thank you again.